Basic Ecology, the ecosystem in adventure. A multimedia in basic ecology. Unit 1, Ecosystem. This unit is about one area of biology that has regained much attention lately, the ecosystem. The extraordinary attention has given because of the worsening condition of the environment brought about by people's activities that are possibly fueled by two very strong influences. First, an imbalance between population size, that is the demand, and the available resources and service, that is the supply. Second, a materialistic concept of economic development which focuses acquired and neglects the quality of life. Chapter 1. What maintains balances in an ecosystem? Module 1. Basic concepts of an ecosystem. An ecosystem is an ecological unit that includes all the interacting parts of an environment in an area. It contains the abiotic and biotic components through which nutrients are cycled and energy flows. Examples of ecosystem. Natural ecosystems. River. Coral reef. Mountains. Desert. Plains. Forest. Meadow. Pond. Man-made ecosystem. Artificial island. Garden. Farm. Aquarium. Basic components of an ecosystem. Abiotic or physical factors. Terrain. Sea. Plains. Biotic or living things composed of producers. Consumers. Decomposers. Lesson 1. Levels of biological organization. Living things are organisms. The examples most familiar to are plants and animals. A group of organisms of the same kind living in a particular area at a given time is called population. All the different kinds of organisms that are interacting with one another in a given area constitutes a biotic community. The biotic components of a grassland ecosystem are the living organisms that exist in the ecosystem. Those that manufacture food are called producers. They are mostly plants. Those that cannot manufacture their own food and therefore eat other organisms are called consumers. Animals and fungi belong to this group. And the final consumers that decompose organic matter are called decomposers. They are mostly microbes, bacteria and fungi, and few bigger organisms. These different roles performed by the members of a biotic community are referred to as their ecological niches. The members of a biotic community also interact with their environment. This brings us to another level of biological organization of the ecosystem. Organisms live in different types of environment, habitat. Some, like fish and water hyacinth, live in water. We say they are aquatic. Others, like carabao and bamboo, live on land. We say they are terrestrial. Some, like most birds and orchids, live on trees. We say they are arboreal. The type of environment in which an organism lives is referred to as habitat. For an organism to survive in its habitat, it must be able to A. Tolerate the environment condition in that place. B. Protect itself from or compete efficiently with other organisms that can also tolerate the environmental conditions in that place. The biosphere. Atmosphere, lithosphere, and hydrosphere. A fourth region called biosphere is formed by the merging of ecosystems all over the surface of the Earth. The biosphere is like a very thin envelope surrounding the Earth at the bottom of the atmosphere. Most living things are found within the space extending upward to the canopy of the tallest trees and downward to a depth of about 70 meters of lighted water. In other words, the biosphere includes the surface of the lithosphere, body of water, and the ocean floor where living organisms exist. Lesson 2. Biotic components of an ecosystem. Another way of grouping organisms is to distinguish between those that can make their own food, the autotrophs, and those that cannot, the heterotrophs. Those that manufacture their own food are said to be autotrophic. The terms autotroph and autotrophic came from the Greek word auto meaning self and tropikos meaning nursing or feeding. Thus, they mean self-nourishing or self-feeding. Autotrophs are the producers of biotic communities. Most autotrophic organisms manufacture food by utilizing the energy from the sun. The process is known as photosynthesis. Plants, algae, and some bacteria have green pigments called chlorophyll that captures sunlight and thus permits them to perform photosynthesis. Another group of bacteria has the ability to manufacture food using the energy stored in inorganic molecules through the process called chemosynthesis. Compared to photosynthetic autotrophs, chemosynthetic autotrophs have much more limited distribution in the biosphere. However, they play a very important role in certain habitats, such as ocean floor around hydrothermal vents in such a hot mineral-rich environment. Chemosynthetic sulfur bacteria are the sole producers of entire communities of heat-tolerant organisms. The very productive communities thrive near the vents at temperature of around 40 degrees Celsius. The term heterotroph and heterotrophic came from the Greek words heteros meaning other and tropikos meaning nursing. Heterotrophs are the consumers and the decomposers of biotic communities. They may be grouped into two based on size. The large ones are called macro-consumers. The prefix macro literally means large, while the tiny ones are called micro-consumers. Micro means small. Cow, dog, and frogs are examples of macro-consumers. Microbes such as the malarial parasites, paramecium, and non-autotrophic bacteria are examples of decomposers. Heterotrophs may also be grouped into four based on what they feed on. Those that feed on plants such as carabaos and goats are called plant eaters or herbivores. Those that feed on flesh or meat such as dogs and cats are called flesh eaters or carnivores. Those that feed on both plants and meat, such as humans and chickens, are called variety eaters or omnivores. Those that feed on small pieces of leaves and other organic matters, collectively called detritus, are known as detritus feeders or detritivores. Detritivores are abundant on the forest floor, in soil, and in bodies of water. Still another group of heterotrophs consists of those that absorb dissolved organic materials, usually the product of decomposition. These are called saprotrophs. Their mode of feeding is known as saprotrophic nutrition. The most abundant saprotrophs are saprotrophic bacteria. Other examples are mushrooms and other fungi. Lesson 3. Abiotic components of an ecosystem. Certain aspects of physical environment determine the distribution of plants and animals on land. Three of these are climate, soil, surface relief or topography, effects of climatic condition, light. Talahib grows well in abundant sunlight, while ferns grow well in the shade. Temperature. Pine trees grow well in cold countries, in the Philippines at the high elevation. On the other hand, banana plants thrive in tropical countries. Third is moisture. The gabi plant grows well in water-soaked ground, while the rose plant prefers moderate water only. Lesson 4. Kinds of ecosystem. The terms habitat, ecosystem, and biome are closely related. Habitat refers to the type of environment in which organisms live. Ecosystem is concerned not just with the physical environment, but also with the living things that interact with it. Biome refers to a large region characterized by particular pattern of the annual temperature and precipitation distribution. a predominant vegetation type. In describing a biome, the focus is on its plant life, animal life, and climate of the region. Examples are forest, grassland, and desert biome. The factor that distinguishes biomes is the climate of the region, particularly temperature and rainfall. On the other hand, ecosystem is concerned with the microclimate and other physical and environmental conditions of the area.
The Earth is covered by a variety of regions of characteristic vegetation called biomes. Examples of biomes include tropical rainforests, like those found in the Amazon basin and northeastern Australia, the temperate deciduous forests of Europe and the eastern United States, the coniferous forests, or taiga, that span much of northern Europe and Canada, grasslands, like those that once covered much of the central United States, the African savanna, that supports some of the Earth's great populations of herbivores and large predators, chaparral, found along coastal areas in places like California and the southern tip of Africa, tundra, that covers much of the land near the Arctic Circle and the upper slopes of mountain ranges, and deserts, like the Namib, along the southern African coast, and the Sonoran of the American Southwest. All living organisms, no matter which biome they live in, require 4 basic resources in order to survive: nutrients from which to construct living tissue, energy to power that construction, liquid water to serve as the medium in which the reactions that build living tissue occur, and temperatures appropriate to carrying out life processes. Nutrient levels sufficient to support life are found in most of the Earth's surface strata, as is witnessed by the taiga and grasslands that cover what was once the bare rock left by receding glaciers, and the lush paradises that exist on islands formed by the lava flows of volcanoes. Likewise, sunlight, which is the initial source energy for all terrestrial biomes, is available in adequate quantities in most biomes at least part of the year. However, the other 2 requirements of life, liquid water and temperatures appropriate to carrying out life processes, are unevenly distributed on the Earth's surface. For example, liquid water is much more readily available throughout the year in tropical rainforests than in the Earth's desert communities. Likewise, temperatures appropriate to carrying out life processes exist throughout the year on the African savanna, while on the alpine or Arctic tundra, appropriate temperatures may be reached for only 5 months a year, and even then may be much lower than those of the savanna. Thus, it is largely the availability of liquid water and temperatures appropriate to carrying out life processes that sets limits on the amount and types of organisms that can exist within a given biome. In deserts, for example, plant and animal life is sparse due to the limited availability of water, and though the species inhabiting any of the Earth's great deserts may differ, they all have adaptations that enable them to deal with extreme heat and drought. Likewise, all the species living on the tundra have adaptations to deal with extremely cold, harsh winters, short growing seasons, and the layer of permanent frost that lies in the soil right below them, even in the savannas, arise along the major factor affecting the distribution of water on the Earth's land surface gradually become and average temperatures at various locations. Trees and thorny scrub forests scattered about. Let's now look. Virtually all a year's precipitation, 30 to 50 centimeters, falls on the trees and grasslands of the savanna during a rainy season of several months. During the dry season, no rain may fall for months, and the earth becomes hard, dry, and dusty. Grasses are well adapted to the savanna's climate, growing very rapidly during the rainy season and dying back to drought-resistant roots during dry periods. Only a few uniquely adapted trees, such as the thorny acacia or the water-storing baobab, can survive the savanna's devastating dry seasons. The savanna is maintained by fires and heavy grazing of herbivores, which minimizes the opportunity for trees to grow, and for the savanna to revert into dense thorn forest or tropical deciduous forest. The African savanna probably has the most diverse and impressive array of large mammals on Earth, including herbivores from antelope, wildebeest, and buffalo to elephants, rhinos, and giraffes. Along with these herbivores come the carnivores who prey upon them, such as lions, leopards, and hyenas. Most of these animals wander the savanna in response to seasonal changes in the availability of food and water. It is in this environment of vast grasslands and scattered clusters of trees populated by huge herbivores and powerful carnivores that humankind arose. Abundant grasses that make the savanna a suitable habitat for so much wildlife can also make it suitable for grazing domestic animals, such as cattle, sheep, and goats. As the human population of East Africa increases, so does the pressure of domestic grazing upon the savanna. Fences used to contain livestock increasingly disrupt the migration of the great herds of herbivores searching for food and water. Ecologists have discovered that native herbivores convert grass into meat much more efficiently than cattle and other domestic herbivores. In response, some African ranchers have recently begun to raise antelopes, ostriches, and other native grazers on the African savanna instead of cattle. Ecologically, wetlands are among the richest of biomes. They contain a diverse community of invertebrates which support a wide variety of birds, many of which nest in the protective cover of wetlands. Herbivores from crustaceans to muskrats consume algae, detritus, and plants. In addition to the rich diversity of wildlife that is supported by wetlands, the ecological and economic value of wetlands is much larger than their geographic extent implies. They provide water storage basins that reduce the intensity of flooding, and they improve water quality by filtering pollutants. In the past, humans have often regarded wetlands as wastelands, sources of mosquitoes, flies, and bad odors, and destroyed many wetlands, mostly to provide land for agriculture and development. Recently, both government and private organizations are attempting to protect remaining wetlands through acquisition, economic incentives, and regulation. The area where a freshwater stream or river merges with the ocean is called an estuary. It is often bordered by extensive coastal wetlands called mudflats and salt marshes. Salinity varies in different parts of estuaries, from nearly that of freshwater to that of the ocean. It also varies on a daily cycle with the rise and fall of the tide. Nutrients carried by the river enrich estuarine waters, making estuaries one of the most biologically productive environments on Earth. Salt marsh grasses, algae, and phytoplankton are the major producers in estuaries. This environment also supports a variety of worms, oysters, crabs, and many of the fish species that humans consume. Many marine invertebrates and fishes use estuaries as a breeding ground or migrate through them to freshwater habitats upstream. Estuaries are also crucial feeding areas for many semi-aquatic vertebrates, particularly waterfowl. Although estuaries support a wide variety of extremely valuable commercial species, areas around estuaries are also prime locations for commercial and residential development. In addition, estuaries are unfortunately at the receiving end of pollutants dumped upstream. Very little undisturbed estuary habitat remains, and a large percentage has been totally eliminated by landfills and development, such as 3Com Park in San Francisco. Many states have now, rather belatedly, taken steps to preserve their remaining estuaries. All organisms living in an ecosystem, such as the African savanna, require energy and nutrients in order to carry out essential life activities, such as growth, respiration, and reproduction. On the savanna, as in nearly every ecosystem on Earth, Sunlight provides the energy that powers life, while nutrients and the other critical building blocks of life, such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water, enter the ecosystem from the non-living environment, the atmosphere, and the earth or sea from which the ecosystem arises. Solar energy continuously bombards the earth, day after day, year after year, providing an essentially limitless source of energy for the Earth's ecosystems. That energy flows through ecosystems, starting with the plants that convert the light energy to chemical energy via photosynthesis. Energy captured by plants is then transferred to the herbivores that graze on the plants. From there, part of the energy is transferred to predators as they eat the herbivores. Scavengers also obtain part of the energy that flooded into the ecosystem as sunlight as they pick at the remains left by predators. Finally, decomposers, breaking down what's left to the molecular level, obtain the last remaining bits of energy from what started as beams of light. It is fortunate for life on Earth that the flow of energy from the sun is essentially limitless, because as energy flows from plant to decomposer, each organism along the way releases part of the energy they capture as heat to the atmosphere, energy that is forever lost for biological purposes within the ecosystem. Thus, for the flow of energy and for the flow of life itself to continue in an ecosystem, an outside source must constantly be injecting it with new energy. Unlike solar energy, the nutrients essential to life are limited. The Earth only has so much carbon or phosphorus or nitrogen available for living organisms. For example, each year, photosynthesis in plants and other organisms captures approximately 1/7 of the carbon available in the atmosphere. If biological processes, such as cellular respiration, didn't return most of this captured carbon back to the atmosphere, life as we know it on Earth would rapidly end, as there would be no carbon in the atmosphere for plants or other photosynthetic organisms to carry out life processes, such as capturing the energy in sunlight. So in order for life on Earth to continue, nutrients must be constantly recycled by the Earth's ecosystems. Thus, energy flows through ecosystems while nutrients cycle through them. The processes by which energy flows through and nutrients are cycled within an ecosystem play a major role in shaping the complex interactions that occur between populations within the Earth's great living communities. Let's now take a look at how the energy and nutrients crucial to life travel through ecosystems and the interactions their travels generate.
Leaves provide trees with all their food. They are the kitchens in a plant. Photosynthesis is the process by which green leaves prepare food. This process requires sunlight. Sunlight shines through the top of the leaf and reaches the underlying layer of cells. The green pigment chlorophyll in the chloroplast traps the light energy. In the chloroplast, a process that uses water changes the light energy into a kind of chemical energy called ATP. This chemical energy is stored in the chloroplast. The chloroplasts use the chemical energy to make food. Air enters the leaf through the stomata and moves into tiny spaces around the food-making cells in the leaf. Carbon dioxide from the air passes through the cell walls and membranes of the cells. Carbon dioxide enters the chloroplast, where the previously stored chemical energy converts the carbon dioxide into sugar. As a byproduct of this process, oxygen is released into the air.
When life took hold on the planet around 4 billion years ago, there was a vast network of hydrothermal vents, perhaps providing the geochemical energy to spawn and support life. There is now evidence that the surface of this early Earth was bombarded by meteors and asteroids. The safest harbor for life may have been in the deep. A deep-sea mountain range over 46,000 miles long, known as the mid-ocean ridge system. It stretches around the planet like the seams on a baseball and marks where the great plates of the Earth's crust are spreading apart. All along this vast network, volcanic eruptions give birth to new ocean floor. And molten rock deep under the seabed creates the scalding black smokers that stream from vents and chimneys. The birth of a chimney starts when molten rock far below the seabed heats up water circulating through the cracks. The hot water rises, carrying dissolved metals such as iron, copper, and zinc from deep within the crust. When this hot acidic fluid hits near freezing seawater, the metals come out of solution to form the rocky walls of the chimney. The geology and chemistry of the vents have changed little. Some of these chimneys tower as high as 15-story buildings. And though sunlight never reaches them, they are blanketed with life.
It's part of this mystery about this environment is that you go through the really dark water where you don't expect to find much. And then suddenly you start seeing life, and it's life that's very beautiful because it is very bright and luminescent, and also very striking because it doesn't look like anything that we're used to.
These worms harbor inside their bodies a remarkable source of food, tiny, single-celled bacteria. These microbes are able to produce food using hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals that flow around the chimneys. Each microbe is invisible to the naked eye, but when billions clump together, they appear like cottony webs draping the sea floor. As plants at the surface use the energy of sunlight, these microbes use energy stored in chemicals to grow and multiply. The larger creatures in this world either live off microbes within their bodies or prey on one another. Giant spider crabs, snails and sea stars, the fish and the octopus, all are ultimately dependent on tiny, single-celled organisms and the volcanic fluids that flow from the rocks. This is a world where the energy for life springs not from the sun, but from the geothermal forces of the Earth itself.
As a biologist, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the geology is the driver for the biology. And in fact, even the structure of the rocks that are in the chimneys are going to determine the type of fauna you find on top of the chimneys.
And by delving inside a chimney, they may find clues to how life itself originated.
Lesson 3. Flow of materials in an ecosystem. Respiration. By which carbon dioxide and water are released by living things to the environment. Decomposition. By which materials from bodies of dead organisms are returned by decomposers to the environment. Lesson 4. Interaction of population in an ecosystem. Ecological niches. Food chain. food web. Symbiotic relationships. From the word symbiosis, Greek symbion, to live together, the term for the interdependence of different species which are sometimes called symbiont. Mutualism, symbiosis that results in mutual benefit to the interdependent organisms. Commensalism is an association between two different kinds of non-parasitic animals called commensals that is harmless to both and in which one of the organism benefits. Parasitism, also known as antagonistic symbiosis. One organism receives no benefits and is often injured while supplying nutrients or shelter for the other organism. Predation is the capture and consumption of organisms by other organisms to sustain life. Module 3. Materials and Nutrient Cycles.
Water is the fundamental ingredient for life on Earth. Looking at our Earth from space, with its vast and deep ocean, it appears as though there is an abundance of water for our use. However, only a small portion of Earth's water is accessible for our needs. How much fresh water exists and where it is stored affects us all. Nearly 2/3 of this fresh water is stored in the polar ice caps, snowpacks, and glaciers, making it inaccessible for long periods of time. The water cycle is dynamic. It describes the continuous movement of water on, above, and below the surface of the Earth, and the transitions from one state to another. Sea surface temperature, surface winds, and air temperature influence the rate of evaporation at the ocean surface. In the tropics, warm ocean surface temperatures support high rates of evaporation. Wind also increases evaporation. When the air's temperature is warmer, it can hold more water. While the atmosphere does not store a large quantity of water compared to the ocean, rivers, and lakes, it can transport water quickly from one place to another. Low-lying regions of the atmosphere with high moisture and strong winds can form atmospheric rivers to transport water horizontally. Clouds are formed as water vapor cools and condenses into droplets and ice crystals. Clouds and water vapor act as insulators in the atmosphere. Clouds help shield the Earth from the sun and trap heat from below. When cloud particles grow large enough, they may fall out as rain or snow. Under the right conditions, areas of precipitation can grow into large storms. As storms grow, they transfer heat vertically into the upper atmosphere. The migration of storms helps to distribute heat between the equator and poles, shaping wind patterns globally. How storms grow and intensify depends on atmospheric moisture, surface temperatures, and wind patterns. Precipitation is concentrated in some parts of the world and scarce in others. It can vary substantially from season to season and from year to year. Water that falls on the land surface as precipitation is stored within snowpacks, lakes, reservoirs, soils, and underground aquifers. Water availability varies from place to place and over time. The availability of water affects the type and abundance of vegetation, the primary source of food for animals and people. Extreme water cycle variability, unusually dry or wet conditions, impacts humans worldwide. Each year, hazards such as floods exact a costly economic and human toll. Most of the water that falls onto land remains stored there for weeks or more. Snowfall is stored as snowpack or ice. Meltwater and rainfall are stored in lakes and soils. Some of the water is absorbed by plant roots or drains into the water table. Eventually, the water will evaporate to the atmosphere or return to the ocean in streams and rivers, providing a source of nutrient-rich water that supports ocean life. Sensors on a suite of NASA satellites observe and measure water on land, in the ocean, and in the atmosphere. These measurements are important to understanding the availability and distribution of Earth's water, which is both vital to life and vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and a growing world population.
Carbon is the basic building block of life, and these unique atoms are found everywhere on Earth. Carbon makes up the Earth's plants and animals, and carbon is also stored in the ocean, the atmosphere, and the crust of the planet. A carbon atom could spend millions of years moving through the Earth in a complex cycle. Understanding the carbon cycle and how it is changing is key to understanding Earth's changing climate. On land, plants remove carbon from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Animals eat plants and either breathe out carbon or it moves up the food chain. When plants and animals die and decay, they transfer carbon back to the soil. Moving offshore, the ocean holds huge amounts of carbon, about 50 times the amount we find in the atmosphere.
The ocean is sometimes called a carbon sink, meaning that it absorbs or takes up carbon from the atmosphere. It takes up carbon through physical and biological processes.
At the ocean's surface, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere dissolves into the water. Tiny marine plants called phytoplankton use this carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Phytoplankton are the base of the marine food web. After animals eat the plants, they breathe out the carbon or pass it up the food chain. Sometimes phytoplankton die, decompose, and are recycled in the surface waters. Phytoplankton can also sink to the ocean floor, carrying carbon as they descend. Over long time scales, this process has made the ocean floor the largest reservoir of carbon on the planet. Most of the ocean's nutrients are in cold, deep water. In a process called upwelling, currents bring nutrients and carbon up to the surface. Carbon can then be released as a gas back into the atmosphere, continuing the carbon cycle. By cycling huge amounts of carbon, the ocean helps regulate climate.
So when you think of climate, you don't often think of the ocean. Climate, you think of, is it going to be hotter this year? Is it going to be colder this year? But the oceans are actually a great regulator or controller of the Earth's climate. And they even are controlling how much carbon is in the atmosphere, which can slow down how quickly climate change is occurring.
At the most basic level, the balance between incoming sunlight and outgoing heat determines the Earth's climate. Greenhouse gases act like a blanket. and trap heat in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. In the past 2 centuries, humans have increased atmospheric carbon dioxide by more than 30% by burning fossil fuels and cutting down forests. The Earth has not experienced carbon dioxide levels this high for the past several million years. Researchers are learning that future climate change will depend on carbon levels in the land, in the atmosphere, and in the sea, and how these levels respond to human disturbance. About 1/3 of all human-generated carbon emissions has dissolved in the ocean. More than 80% of Earth's added heat is now stored in the ocean.
In the future, as the planet gets warmer, the water's going to warm up, and warm water can hold less carbon than cold water. The other thing is, on a warmer planet, some of the currents are going to slow down, and so we might not be forming as much of this cold, deep water. So we won't be able to transport carbon into the deep sea. So on the whole, the ocean's going to become less effective at removing carbon from the atmosphere.
Throughout most of Earth's ocean, the warmer water, weaker circulation, and new temperature gradients that result from climate change will impact marine life and ecosystems. These changes affect the ocean's ability to store carbon. Increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere impacts marine life in other ways.
As the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide, it becomes more acidic, and this can be a threat to some of the organisms that live inside the ocean.
As Earth's climate continues to change, how will researchers monitor something as big as the ocean and something as complex as the carbon cycle? NASA Earth-observing satellites give scientists the big picture view of our home planet. Varied satellites help researchers detect changes in ocean climate and ecology over time, providing vital insight into the health of our home planet.
Oxygen cycle. Oxygen cycle, one of the biogeochemical cycles, is closely linked to carbon cycle. The major sources of oxygen are atmosphere and hydrosphere. Approximately 21% of atmosphere is composed of free oxygen, whereas oxygen is seen in the combined form as water in hydrosphere. The importance of oxygen for sustaining life can be understood from the fact that all living things need oxygen for breathing and respiration. Burning also requires oxygen. We will discuss how such a vital gas is maintained in nature. Photosynthesis and respiration are complementary processes in the living world. Photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and water as raw materials to produce sugars and other organic molecules. These molecules, in turn, serve as food for other organisms. All of these organisms carry out respiration, a process that uses oxygen to release carbon dioxide from the same carbon atoms contained in the food. Thus, one process uses carbon dioxide and releases oxygen, whereas the other uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. These are the two major processes that help to maintain the balance of oxygen in the atmosphere. Another process that adds oxygen to the atmosphere is photodissociation of water vapor. Being a very reactive gas, during its cycling, oxygen combines with various other elements to different solid or gaseous compounds. Oxides of nitrogen and elements like iron, carbonates of calcium, etc. are formed like this. These compounds once again may enter into other biogeochemical cycles. Some oxygen molecules will get converted to ozone, and the reverse will also take place. Observe the given illustration to understand oxygen cycle in its totality. Nitrogen cycle.
What is nitrogen used for? Nitrogen forms an essential part of amino acids which make up proteins and DNA. Nitrogen is essential for all living cells. Air, which is about 78% nitrogen gas, is the major reservoir of nitrogen. But most organisms cannot use nitrogen in this form. Plants must secure their nitrogen in fixed form, that is, incorporated in compounds such as nitrate ions, NO3 negative, ammonia NH3, urea NH2 2CO. Animals secure their nitrogen and all other compounds from plants or animals that have fed on plants. What is nitrogen cycle? 4 processes that participate in the cycling of nitrogen through the biosphere constitute the nitrogen cycle. They are nitrogen fixation, decay, nitrification, denitrification. Role of microorganisms. Microorganisms play a major role in all 4 processes of the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen fixation. The nitrogen molecule N2 is quite inert. To break it apart so that its atoms can combine with other atoms requires the input of substantial amounts of energy. 3 processes are responsible for most of the nitrogen fixation in the biosphere. Atmospheric fixation by lightning, biological fixation by certain microbes, alone or in a symbiotic relationship with plants, industrial fixation. Atmospheric fixation. The enormous energy of lightning breaks nitrogen molecules and enables their atoms to combine with oxygen in the air, forming nitrogen oxides. These dissolve in rain, forming nitrates that are carried to the earth. Atmospheric nitrogen fixation probably contributes some 5 to 8% of the total nitrogen fixed. Industrial fixation. Under great pressure at a temperature of 600 degrees centigrade and with the use of a catalyst, atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen, usually derived from natural gas or petroleum, can be combined to form ammonia NH3. Ammonia can be used directly as a fertilizer, but most of it is further processed to urea and ammonium nitrate, NH4NO3. Biological fixation. The ability to fix nitrogen is found only in certain bacteria. Some live in a symbiotic relationship with plants of the legume family. Example, soybeans, alfalfa. Some establish symbiotic relationships with plants other than legumes. Example, alders. Some nitrogen-fixing bacteria live free in the soil. Nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria are essential for maintaining the fertility of semi-aquatic environments like rice paddies. Biological nitrogen fixation requires a complex set of enzymes and a huge expenditure of ATP. Although the first stable product of the process is ammonia, this is quickly incorporated into protein and other organic nitrogen compounds. Decay. The proteins made by plants enter and pass through food webs, just as carbohydrates do. At each trophic level, their metabolism produces organic nitrogen compounds that return to the environment, chiefly in excretions. The final beneficiaries of these materials are microorganisms of decay. They break down the molecules in excretions and dead organisms into ammonia. Nitrification. Ammonia can be taken up directly by plants, usually through their roots. However, most of the ammonia produced by decay is converted into nitrates. This is accomplished in 2 steps. Bacteria of the genus Nitrosomonas oxidize NH3 to nitrites, NO2 negative. Bacteria of the genus Nitrobacter oxidize the nitrites to nitrates, NO3 negative. These two groups or autotrophic bacteria are called nitrifying bacteria. Through their activities, which supply them with all their energy needs, nitrogen is made available to the roots of plants. Many legumes, in addition to fixing atmospheric nitrogen, also perform nitrification, converting some of their organic nitrogen to nitrites and nitrates. These reach the soil when they shed their leaves. Denitrification. The three processes, nitrogen fixation, nitrification, and decay described so far, remove nitrogen from the atmosphere and pass it through ecosystems. Denitrification reduces nitrates to nitrogen gas, thus replenishing the atmosphere. Once again, bacteria are the agents. They live deep in soil and in aquatic sediments where conditions are anaerobic. They use nitrates as an alternative to oxygen for the final electron acceptor in their respiration. Thus they close the nitrogen cycle. Click on the summary button to view the role of microorganisms in nitrogen cycle. Microorganisms involved in nitrogen cycle. When we cause nitrogen overload in an ecosystem, there are many drastic effects. These are enlisted here.
Hydrogen sulfide gas is released into the atmosphere by volcanic eruptions, hot springs, and anaerobic decay of sulfur-containing biological material in swamps, bogs, and tidal flats. Certain marine algae produce dimethyl sulfide, a volatile compound that enters the atmosphere as tiny droplets. Sulfur dioxide gas is released into the atmosphere by volcanoes and also forms when dimethyl sulfide reacts with oxygen gas. The burning of fossil fuels, such as coal and oil, releases sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Sulfur dioxide reacts with atmospheric oxygen to produce sulfur trioxide. Some sulfur trioxide reacts with tiny water droplets to form sulfuric acid. Sulfur oxides also react with ammonia to produce tiny particles of ammonium salts. The winds carry droplets of sulfuric acid and particles to sulfate salts, which then fall to the earth in acid deposition. By adding sulfur compounds to the air, the use of fossil fuels increases the rate of acid deposition. All living things require sulfur to make proteins. Plants get sulfur by taking up ions of sulfate salts from the soil. Animals get sulfur by eating plants, and all living things release sulfur compounds when they decay. Decomposition releases sulfate salts, which can be taken up by plants, as well as gaseous hydrogen sulfide. Some hydrogen sulfide enters the atmosphere, but when decay occurs in an oxygen-free environment, anaerobic bacteria break down hydrogen sulfide and release sulfur gas. Oxygen-requiring bacteria can incorporate sulfur into sulfate salts, which can be taken up by plants and enter the food chain once again.
Over the last few centuries, the human population has increased dramatically. and placed enormous demands on the Earth's ecosystems. The human population affects the living Earth in a number of ways. First, by releasing pollutants into Earth's atmosphere and waterways and onto the land itself. And secondly, by the direct destruction of habitat to create cities, build roads, develop agriculture, exploit natural resources, dispose of solid waste, and pursue other human endeavors. In the most general biological sense, pollutants are materials such as organic or inorganic chemicals or types of energy such as heat or sound that, when released into an ecosystem at certain levels, threaten species populations in that ecosystem and, in turn, often the entire ecosystem itself. In a narrower, human-centered sense, pollutants are materials or types of energy that, when present in the environment at certain levels, have adverse effects on human health, activities, or survival. Materials released into the environment fall into two broad categories: biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable materials are largely those like sewage, scraps of food, and oil pollutants that were initially created by biological processes and that can be broken down into their component parts and recycled through the food chain by decomposing microbes and other organisms. Non-biodegradable materials cannot be broken down by natural processes or are broken down only very slowly. Examples of non-biodegradable materials are asbestos, glass, various plastics, elements such as lead, mercury, and cadmium, radioactive wastes, and chemicals such as DDT, dieldrin, and PCBs. Once these materials are released into the environment, they remain there for a long time, sometimes forever.
If the Earth was not surrounded by a warming blanket of air, it would be much too cold for human habitation. Earth's atmosphere acts as this blanket because it contains small amounts of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and other gases in the atmosphere, known as greenhouse gases. These gases help retain heat through a vital process called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect occurs when sunlight passes through the atmosphere and strikes the Earth. Some of the light is reflected, and some is absorbed. The absorbed light warms the surface of the Earth. The heated surface then radiates infrared light into the atmosphere, where it is absorbed by greenhouse gases. These gases help regulate the temperature of the Earth. Due to the burning of large amounts of coal, oil, and natural gas, the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has dramatically increased over the last 300 years. For instance, carbon dioxide, abbreviated as CO2, has increased 30% since 1750. Trees remove CO2 from the air as part of their natural processes. As human beings cut down forests, the capacity of trees to remove CO2 from the air is diminished. Scientists are concerned that as we continue to burn large amounts of fossil fuels and deplete our forests, an exaggerated greenhouse effect will occur, resulting in an increase in the world's surface temperature, known as global warming. A warming of only a few degrees could cause a number of environmental problems, including the melting of the polar ice caps, causing ocean levels to rise and flooding coastal areas.
Many people look at the ocean and they see water. But it's not just water. It is a living system that shapes the character of the planet.
Hubungan kita masyarakat di sini antara laut sama halnya dengan anak kita atau tubuh kita sama saja.
The ocean gives us more than half of the oxygen we breathe. It regulates the climate, and it gives us all this seafood and recreational opportunities.
The ocean is an enormous blue opportunity, able to provide us with life, with leisure, with commerce, with industry, all of the fundamental underpinnings for a sustainable economy.
Healthy ocean translates into economic growth and development.
Necesitamos dirigir nuestra mirada hacia los océanos. Océanos saludables garantizan a su vez riqueza y prosperidad.
We have changed the ocean. We've lost 90% of the big fish in the sea. We've seen the decline of and loss of about half the coral reefs and a growth of dead zones.
We're also seeing effects on all kinds of marine species. We have have to have a healthy ocean. It provides so much to us that we just take for granted.
Sin arrecife vivo no hay playas. Sin arrecife vivo no hay pesca. No hay atractivos visuales que traen a gente a bucear, a snorkelear, a ver aves.
We need those oceans to be healthy if we're going to continue to feed what is a rapidly growing population.
When you live in the fishing communities, you start wondering, what is happening to us? What is happening to me as an individual? When you start wondering that way, then the bigger question that comes in, what is happening to my future?
Ocean is part of our life. It's fundamental for us. If we don't protect that in the long term, we die.
12% of the land is protected in national parks or reserves. In the ocean, less than 2% is protected.
Sabemos que en el futuro nos va a rendir no lo que vamos a ganar, a lo mejor el doble de lo que debimos de ganar si nosotros vamos a pescar en este momento. Entonces, ese es el valor que nosotros le estamos dando a los refugios pesqueros.
This is one area of investment where the returns are so, easy to see.
It's a good investment because no one has more at stake than companies. Without the resource, there's no company. So it's in the company's best interest to invest for the future.
Tubuh kita memang sudah hancur, berarti kita juga hancur. Karena kekayaan atau keindahan pun apa, kesejahteraan kita itu letaknya dalam laut.
There's going to be a great opportunity for people to make a difference. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, feed people.
If we look after the ocean will look after us.
The world needs a new philosophy. Not a philosophy of competition, but a philosophy of cooperation. We survive or we perish together. No one group can survive alone.
Smog is often very visible, but another kind of pollution, acid rain, is more difficult to see. To the eye, acid rain looks like any other rain, but it contains harmful amounts of acid. Acid rain results from invisible chemical particles that are produced by burning fossil fuels for energy. Coal-burning power plants and factories and gasoline-burning cars are major sources of these chemicals, which combine with water vapor in the air. They can then travel hundreds of miles before returning to Earth in acid rain. Acid rain can make lakes unfit for fish and other animals and kill certain kinds of plants. These trees in the Adirondack Mountains in New York died because of the effects of acid rain. Acid rain can also damage statues, monuments, and buildings that are made of limestone or marble. You can do an experiment to see the effects of acid rain. Pour some vinegar into a glass. Vinegar has a lot of acid in it. Then put a piece of chalk into the vinegar. Chalk contains calcium carbonate, one of the ingredients of limestone and marble. Observe what happens. The chalk begins to disintegrate. In the same way, acid rain can destroy marble and limestone.
Planète Terre.
Планета Земля.
Planeta Tierra.
كوكب الأرض.
行星地球. Planet Earth. In this vast universe of ours, we know of no other place so hospitable to life in its infinite variety. But today, climate change poses a clear and present danger. It threatens every species on Earth, increasing the number of extreme weather events that require international action. The time for leadership and meaningful initiatives is now. As part of an intergovernmental effort under UN leadership, the world's top scientists have concluded that our climate is changing, and they have issued urgent warnings about our future we can't afford to ignore. The IPCC reports leave no room for doubt. Global warming is a fact. And human activity, including the burning of fossil fuels, industrial emissions, and deforestation, are the main cause of climate change and its most dangerous side effects. The dramatic rise in greenhouse gases over the last 250 years, particularly carbon dioxide, has caused temperatures to rise across the globe, and this warming is projected to accelerate at an alarming and dangerous pace. Science is a powerful witness. Our world is undergoing a dramatic transformation. Dangerous atmospheric changes already observed and measured will continue for decades. Changes in precipitation patterns will intensify drought in some areas and aggravate flooding in others. And as the world's glaciers disappear and the oceans heat up, global sea levels may rise between 18 and 59 centimeters by the end of the century. The shrinking of Greenland's ice sheet and large-scale loss of ice in Antarctica could exacerbate the problem with unpredictable speed. Small island nations, already victimized by increased storm surges and beach erosion, could one day be lost to the sea. As climate change disrupts nature's balance, biodiversity suffers. In the oceans and on land, all of Earth's species are threatened. Some may disappear forever. Climate change could potentially compound growing population pressures on food supplies, already fragile in many places. Over the long term, worldwide agricultural yields will likely decrease drastically in all regions. And as always, the poorest among us are the most vulnerable. Rain-fed agriculture could drop 50% by 2020 in some African countries. Increasing malnutrition and the need for emergency aid. Nearly 1/6 of the world's people rely on mountain glaciers for drinking water. Crucial supplies, which are expected to decline significantly as these glaciers melt away. 44% of the world's people live within 150 kilometers of the coast and will be exposed to more frequent and more destructive storms and coastal flooding, and rising sea levels, which may over time inundate low-lying countries, islands, and cities. Cities like Alexandria, Kolkata, Dhaka, Bangkok, and Shanghai, home to hundreds of millions of people. We will have to adapt. Regions that bear the least responsibility for what is happening will be among the hardest hit. We can shape a different future. The IPCC's reports that have been endorsed by more than 150 countries offer a range of options for moving forward together. Solutions exist, but there's no time to waste. First, we must stabilize global greenhouse gas emissions. Then, according to the world scientists, we could limit the rise in global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius and prevent the most severe impacts of climate change. If the world reduces its emissions by approximately 2/3 by the year 2050. This must be a global effort, and with real leadership, it can be done. All of us must change our consumption patterns. Improved conservation and energy efficiency could help enormously without requiring major expenditures. But it's largely up to governments to ensure that the right choices are available and attractive, like more efficient modes of transportation and better building codes. Better management of our forests can also play a vital role, helping the planet to heal itself by drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The IPCC also suggests we change the way we think about energy. The cost of fossil fuels should reflect their long-term impacts on climate change. A price on carbon emissions would encourage the development of alternative energy sources, and that would help developing countries choose a more environmentally sustainable course. We must act together, and we must act now. One way or another, the Earth will survive. By acting together, the world's leaders can ensure that we will too, and that the planet we leave behind for our children will be a place where they can thrive.
Chapter 3, Environmental Protection and Management. Module 7, Environmental Jurisprudence. Lesson 1, Environmental Protection Laws in the Philippines. Republic Act No. 9168 Philippine Plant Variety Protection Act of 2002, an act to provide protection to new plant varieties, establishing a National Plant Variety Protection Board, and for other purposes. Republic Act 9147, Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act, an act providing for the conservation and protection of wildlife resources and their habitats, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Republic Act No. 9072, National Caves and Cave Resources Management and Protection Act, an act to manage and protect caves and cave resources and for other purposes. Executive Order No. 79, institutionalizing and implementing reforms in the Philippine mining sector, providing policies and guidelines to ensure environmental protection and responsible mining in the utilization of mineral resources. Republic Act No. 9175, Chainsaw Act of 2002, an act regulating the ownership, possession, sale, importation, and use of chainsaws, penalizing violations thereof, and for other purposes. Republic Act No. 9003, Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, an act providing for an ecological solid waste management program, creating the necessary institutional mechanisms and incentives, declaring certain acts prohibited and providing penalties, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Republic Act No. 8485, the Animal Welfare Act of 1998, an act to promote animal welfare in the Philippines. Republic Act No. 3571, an act to prohibit the cutting, destroying, or injuring of planted or growing trees, flowering plants and shrubs, or plants of scenic value along public road, in plazas, parks, school premises, or in any other public ground. Republic Act No. 8749, Philippine Clean Air Act of 1999. Republic Act No. 8550, the Philippine Fisheries Code of 1998, an act providing for the development, management, and conservation of the fisheries and aquatic resources, integrating all laws pertinent thereto and for other purposes. Lesson 2. Sustainable Ethic and Sustainable Development. Sustainable ethic. A sustainable ethic is an environmental ethic by which people treat the earth as if its resources are limited. This ethic assumes that the earth's resources are not unlimited and that humans must use and conserve resources in a manner that allows their continued use in the future. A sustainable ethic also assumes that humans are a part of a natural environment and that we suffer when the health of a natural ecosystem is impaired. A sustainable ethic includes the following tenets: scarcity. The earth has limited supply of resources. Humans must conserve resources. Humans share the earth's resources with other living things. Growth is not sustainable. Humans are a part of nature. Humans are affected by natural laws. Humans succeed best when they maintain the integrity of natural processes and cooperate with nature. Sustainable development. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It contains within it two key concepts. First, the concept of needs, in particular, the essential needs of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given. Second, the idea of limitations imposed by the state of technology and social organization and the environment's ability to meet present and future needs. Special thanks to Teacher Santi Papagay for the video editing.